This tutorial will walk through the action cliche script that we wrote in class, and it's kind of a good comprehensive overview of a lot of the elements that we discussed. So this can either be watched before or during or after you're watching kind of the individual videos. Right, so we've got our script here. It's going to do some action cliche stuff. To check it, we can go to run module. A little shell window opens up. Do I want to initiate self-destruct? Well, better not. Uh-oh, it's happening anyway. Yeah, I'm not going to narrate this. All right, good. Stopped at 1 second. So what was going on there? So let's walk through line by line. And remember, when you're trying to annotate a script, whether for someone else or for yourself, try to think about, what is happening, right? What are the semantics, and then kind of why. How does it fit into the larger argument? Why was it done there? So on and so forth. Right, so def, right, anytime we introduce the def function, we're just defining a function here, right? And that function we're going to name action cliche, and nothing is going to be passed into it, right? So put a colon at the end anytime you define a function. We're importing a module here. That module is going to be time. Reason we're doing it is so that later on in the script, right, this is one of those instances, and maybe you want to scan down and find where you see time. We know we're going to be bringing up the sleep module, or the sleep method, which is going to allow delays for a second for some gravitas. Right here, we're creating a raw input, which you saw in the beginning, initiate self-destruct. So this is something the user is going to be able to put into the script, and we're temporarily storing that in a variable called answer. Right, if what the user happens to be in is any of the following, right, it's just variance on yes, then printing initiating self-destruct will happen. If they print anything else, right, because we didn't specify anything specific under else, just else, we will print, right, too bad, self-destruct is going to happen anyway, ha ha ha. First instance in which we've kind of come back and used the time module, in which we're doing the sleep method, and then 1 second. Right? You can look that up online if you want to learn more about the time modules, but really this is just to cause a delay of 1 second. So one of these instances in which we're doing something that never really appears in the script in this form, right, but there's a reason. We just create a list early on that stores names of wires. And the reason is so that later, when we get to the moments where we're saying to cut them, we can cycle through something that already exists rather than having to type it out each time. All right, so ultimately this is going to be a countdown clock, so we'll start with 10 seconds as the beginning time for the countdown. We're setting that to a variable y. And right, these happened all behind the scenes, but the next thing you're going to see on the screen would be that the system's overloading, right? And it's going to happen in t minus, well, whatever this value happens to be, it's 10 seconds. Again, we delay for 1 second. So now we're entering a while function. So always important whenever you're reading whiles or ifs or fors, read them as their entire chunk until the next thing, right? So while has to go through everything beneath it for as long as 10 stays less than 1, right? Or sorry, greater than 1. So this for statement will not come into play until we finally get to a point where y, which is now 10, is less than or equal to 1. Right? So sometimes it's helpful to walk through it by the numbers. So right now, y is 10, right? So while y is 10, 10 is greater than 1, yes. So if, right, and this is a modulus, 10 divided by 3 has no remainder, which is false. It would have a remainder, right? So we can almost skip these. We'll come back to them. So it immediately has to go to the else, because this wasn't true. We simply print y, and hence 10 was printed. Right? It is now out of the if moment, right? Notice things matter about what are on their lines, right? So the if didn't work, so then the else. Once the else is done, it goes to the next thing that's in line with it, which is to delay for 1 second. And then to ensure that we actually have a while loop that depreciates and that kind of comes down, we actually set a new value to y, which is its old value, 10 minus 1. So y is now 9. Right? We have to check in with the while loop again. Is 9 greater than 1? Certainly is. Right? This is our first instance in which 9 divided by 3 doesn't actually have a remainder. It does equal 0. That's what that's saying. Right? 9 divided by 3, does it have a remainder? Doesn't. So we're going to print the number 9, a couple of spaces, the word cut, and look at that. We're now referencing the list that we made up here. We're going to slice out what's at the 0th index, right? Often called the first, but I say 0th because it helps remember that slicing begins at 0 and goes forward, right? And that happens to be green wire. Then I'm going to delete that same thing, right? So I've already used its purpose. We've already cut the green wire in my script. I'm not going to go back to it. So I delete that from its position so that the next time the script iterates, what will be in the 0th position will be the blue wire and then the red wire. Don't have to do the else because this worked, so I go to time sleep and I go to this, right? So we can imagine this keeps coming down, right? Every time it's not a multiple of 3, it just prints. When it's a multiple of 3, it prints cut the, and then whatever wire is in the front, deletes that wire till we're down to the red. Finally, we get to a point where y equals 1, all right? So is 1 greater than 1? It is not. So we are now out of the while loop. Boom. We don't have to run through it again. We go right to the 4. So now we're starting a 4, right? Notice I'm saying for each in range, and we're very accustomed to when we see for statements to thinking that that variable, right, each or num or whatever we assign is going to come back again. But notice I never bring up each again, right? So really I'm just using this almost as an iterator. Yet for each in range of 3, that's essentially 3 iterations. That's what this is saying, for 3 iterations. Print whatever y is now, which is 1, and a space, and delay for a second. 1, 1, 1, right? So that's that purpose. It's adding in the end the way they do in action movies where, you know, it kind of blinks right at the 1 because it stopped. Once you finish the range, final thing, because it's in line with everything else, you will print. Good thing action movies, the timer always stops at 1 second. Now, in order to set the script up in a way, right, that I can run it in a shell or I can run it in the command, after I've defined, right, notice I'm heading back to the first line, right? I'm equal again with def, meaning that everything indented past def is part of this function, and now I'm simply calling that function into being. So I'm defining the function, and I'm calling the function, and this is your result here.